Fenton.
JW, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, my friend. I think I've got a full tide there. I think I might have. Have a look at that.
Reminds me of a session of the Blues Brothers where they're pouring the wine. Just fill it up to the top. Come on, fill it up to the top. Right up.
I just noticed how full that water glass is. Oh, it's been a big week, folks. It's been a big week. I need to wash it down. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another Friday session. Wealth, Wine and Wisdom. Andy Fenton, Jason Witten, Ben, good morning, afternoon, evening even. Haven't even started drinking yet, and I don't know my time. But anyway, good to see you, Ben. Great to see you, mate. Alison's here too. Give us a shout out in the chat, folks. See if you're there. Andy, now I have been, Alison, by the way. This wine I got last night, check it out. I didn't buy it, but I did get it from a party I went to last night.
Oh, so you were the smash and grab that I was reading on from Sydney.
There you go. Max's Pinot Noir.
Max.
10 folds.
Pinot Noir.
Yeah, it's meant to be nice. So we'll see. We'll see
mate,
how we go.
Pinot Noir is more of a red drop for you guys up in Queensland. It looks better in a filled glass like that. And it's a little bit lighter. And
nice.
better for the warmer temperatures because it's better when it's a little bit cooler. Little known fact, well, it's not necessarily a fact, I guess. It depends on your perspective, but the great wine connoisseurs of the world say that a Pinot Noir should be drunk at around about 16 degrees Celsius.
There you go.
And it should be allowed to warm up as it oxygenates to room temperature. And that way you'll get the florals to the fruits to then the tannins, and then they die, Jace, and you throw them out before you feed them to your guests the following week when they're 10 days old.
You don't keep the wine in the bottle for 2 weeks and keep drinking it. I just learned that from Andy Fenton, folks. Andy is the wine connoisseur. But Nat, how are you?
Just after a couple of days in hospital recovering from...
Fantastic. Well, it's great to see all of you guys jumping on. Welcome to Wealth, Wine and Wisdom. For those who are coming back, welcome back. Great to have the regulars here. Anyone who's new, give us a shout out in the chat. Say good day. Love to acknowledge you and see where you're from. Tell us where you're from. For those who don't know, Andy and I started Wealth, Wine and Wisdom when COVID hit in 2020, March or April. And we've been going ever since. We're over 50 plus episodes now, which is awesome. But the idea, the general gist, folks, is that we get together, debrief the week. Andy's world of the banking, the share market, equities, financial planning, 20 years plus experience in that, helping thousands of people across Australia, myself in the world of real estate, similar timeframes and clients. And we just help each other out, debrief, property investors, business owners. That's our niche. And we try and make a bit of sense of the news, because sometimes it's going to be a whole lot of noise out there, which can be a whole, conflicting. We talked about that last week in the messages, and you got to make sense of it when you're trying to navigate uncertain times, any times really, at the end of the day. But what we do, Andy, we do 3 pieces of the show, not necessarily in order and not necessarily every time either, but we try to, which is, we do a bit of what's in the news, folks. What's going on out there. A little bit this week, actually. Pretty cool things to talk about. I'm pretty pumped about one of the 2 of the things that I want to share. Sometimes we get around to sharing and educating on things you should know when it comes to the world of investing, going the distance, creating some wealth, staying safe, those sorts of things. And we absolutely love the idea of answering any of your questions. So if you're sitting there now and you've got something on your mind, whack it in the chat for us. And sooner or later, before the end of the night, we'll dive into those questions and give them a shot. We'll offer some opinions, which are sometimes not necessarily factual or accurate. We may offer some facts and some experiences, and hopefully we can all work out which bits are the most useful when it comes to doing something about those questions that you got. So, folks, that's what it looks like for us in the show. And stick with us. It'll be about 50 minutes to 60 minutes long, sometimes a bit longer if we get wound up. But great to see you guys joining us tonight. And there's Sean on a
On the
houseboat.
houseboat.
That is
Wow.
absolutely cracking. Good to see you, mate. Good for. Oh, Andy, did you know? I don't know, folks. I don't know if I've told you guys this story, but Sean just reminds me of how I first bought my first investment property, or my first property. What I did is I actually first bought a houseboat and lived on it for 3 years with my darling wife. We saved up enough money then to buy a house in Sydney. So we lived in Akuna Bay on a houseboat for 3 years.
Get out.
It was awesome. It was amazing. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely loved it. And then we bought a house in the Blue Mountains.
It never got to the space that this river isn't big enough for the two of us.
I lived next to some pretty amazing boats. It was awesome. Met some fantastic people. And I think, folks, I'm one of the only people in Australia who's ever made money out of a boat. I bought I bought a houseboat from the Gold Coast for $41,000. I put it on a truck and shipped it to Sydney for $1,000. And 3 years later, sold it for $56,000.
Wow.
So I was pretty happy with that. And there you go. I did a Richard Branson. There you go. Yeah, it was a very cool lifestyle. So sometimes you got to think outside of the box, folks. Getting going in this game when it comes to taking care of your money. Real estate in Sydney at that point for us was way out of our reach, and we ended up with a water view for $41,000 in the middle of Sydney. It was pretty special, I can tell you. So everyone wanted to come to our house, which floated on the water.
It's amazing, mate. I never knew that. I never knew that. The
Yeah.
funny thing is, you still don't know which side's port, do you?
No, I don't. Actually, is any port left? On the left. Any port left? I remember that. If you're drinking, is there any port left? I did. I drove the boat, sailed it. I don't know. Is it motoring? Motored the boat 3 times. Twice I crashed it. Once I didn't, and that was it over 3 years. So, it was a moored boat, tied up, and we just lived there, but it was awesome. Anyway, enjoyed it.
Right. So you've been through a house crash before.
But boom. Should I put on that? I need a sound effect for that one. But Laura, good to see you here. Happy Friday to you. And Graham, it was always good to have you along, mate. And Bob, you found it. Oh, there we go. Harry's here as well. Bob, good to see you. Allison and Harry's joined us. Good to see you, Harry, mate. Hopefully
straight into business.
Yeah, Harry's got a good question there. Nice, Harry. I'll put a little pin in that one. I've got plenty to say about that, so that'll be great for the question section a little bit later on. But Andy, why don't we kick it off and give it a good nudge? James, while I say hello to James and Aaron, are you ready for a little bit of what's in the news?
Right, ready, rocking, and raring to go, mate. Because as good old Yogi Berra says, who's becoming a big fan of our show, well, from the grave, legend from the grave, a nickel ain't worth a dime anymore. And we're going to start to talk about a few things: inflation, which leads into property prices, leads into shares. It's a lot in the news. It's a lot of BS in the news as well. So we'll chat about some of that. But before we jump into it too much, wanted to just give everyone a little bit of a holler. I know that Anastasia Palashak, your neck of the woods, Jace, neck of the woods. And I know that we did chat about this. I know that we did chat about this last week.
Yes.
And an inside scoop that doesn't exist told me that Anastasia Palashak was listening to Wine and Wisdom and all of our talk about getting over to Japan to investigate low interest rate country. Japan is going to be a theme, I think, for this year in this show. But we wanted to jump over there. And so Anastasia thought, well, we're going for the Olympics.
Why not?
Maybe I just better get over there. She had a bit of ridicule while she was going over there. She got treated like a school child by one of the I've forgotten his name actually now, but one of the press conferences, you saw Anastasia basically be told that she will be there, and she was. So good on her. She won the Olympics. The Brisbane Olympics will focus on sustainability, but the overhaul infrastructure costs remain unclear. So, mate, before we get into the whole inflation side of the equation, I thought I'd expand on what we spoke about last week.
Yes.
In what I think we called it the cheap ass Olympics. And the gold medal goes to those person who could save the most amount of money. But we also talked a little bit last week about how to lie with statistics. And I brought a great book that was written by not a mathematician, not a finance guru, but lo and behold, a journalist. Trump, fake news. So, mate, just have a look at this. Like, I was reading this article.
Zoom into that for us, Andy. Zoom in so we can see
a little bit here.
Yeah.
So let's just do the math. Now, for those of you who have started up a business, who have done any type of forecasting before, especially when you're in that utopian mode of, that greenfield moment, Jason, remember that moment when you just start things up and you think, this can't fail. This cannot fail. This is a sure thing. And pretty much any time any of us have said that, we've been handed our ass at some point in time. And so these are public stats, right? I'll quote the source later on if you need me to, but this is public source. Let's have a look at this as a balance sheet, or as a profit and loss rather. So proposed costs of the Brisbane Olympics, US dollars in millions, which is great because it's actually in Australia. So, well, go figure. Anyway, so the IOC contribution, 726 million. I'm not going to go through all of the stats here. Ticket sales revenue. So they're already predicting ticket sales from one source. So that's a 990 million. 2023, right? $1.16 billion. So anyway, total revenues for the Olympics in 2032, Jason, it's going to be roughly $4.5 billion. That's the total revenue. And mate, that's pretty astounding. These guys must be guns at what they do. They must have some propeller heads, math geniuses sitting behind there, spinning their little caps, flying at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So we know that profit is sanity and revenue is vanity, right? So it's not about the size of things in the locker room, as you say, Jace. It's about the end result. So we need to know what we're going to spend here. And so let's just jump down here for a little bit. You couldn't write this stuff better than what we're seeing right about now. Like this is hilarious. This is every business owner that's ever jumped into business with a sure thing modeled it pretty much the same way. And mate, I must admit, I haven't delved too much into the detail, but when it walks like a duck, sounds like a duck, it's probably a duck, right? And this is a fucking duck. Fair dinkum, this is a duck. So we've got
anyway. Where did it come from?
It's this. Okay, let me just get the statistics here. It's from IOC, Future Host Commission. That's the source. That's the source. Sorry, ladies and gents.
We're going to make 4.5, but we need to spend 4.5.
You've already busted me up here. So have a look at this. So total revenues, $4.508 billion. All right, total expenditure, $4.508 billion.
Was that published anywhere? I think someone just copied and pasted and accidentally put the wrong numbers in, Andy.
Jump on. It's totally available at abc.net.au. These are live statistics that are out in the world at the moment. And, mate, I just thought this is absolutely hilarious. So this is the Sustainable Olympics. And well, let's start on the
down to the dollar. We didn't make more than we spent. That's perfect, isn't it? That's balance anyway.
But I sincerely hope we are doing this show in 2032, and I'll go back to our old slide deck from right back here, and we'll have a look. We'll line up these revenues and actually see where they sit. I reckon on one of these lines, Jace, either the top line of revenue or the bottom line of expenditure, I reckon we shift the decimal point one spot to the right, and we might be a little bit closer to the mark.
Let's see how we go, yeah.
So anyway, Jace, the Sustainable Olympics, you've read it there, black and white. ABC brought it out. IOC statistics. Pretty much, it's going to cost us exactly what it's going to make us. So the Sustainable Olympics, zero financial emissions from this, Jason. And
I like it.
Mate,
it's going to be the Green Olympics.
That's how every business has started on the back of a napkin. I just thought that was hilarious. But let's get into some of the real stuff. And so this is a lot of what's in the news, and we're going to talk a lot about inflation. We're going to talk a lot about supply chains through this year, because it's just so important, and it relates so much to investing out there, and you're going to just get so much BS. And so what I'd really like to do, and I don't have the crystal ball. Let me tell you that. I don't have the crystal ball. But what I do have is an ability to be able to read the data and be able to analyze and be able to start to ask some reasonable questions in and around, is this true? So let's have a little bit of a look around here. Bureau of Statistics, hopefully a reasonably credible source. Jace, hopefully you're happy with that one.
Fingers crossed. Yep.
Consumer Price Index rose 0.8% in the June quarter, according to the data from the Bureau of Statistics. Head of Principal Statistics of the ABS, Michelle, said rising fuel prices accounted for much of the increase in the June quarter CPI, with prices surpassing pre-pandemic levels. This isn't sensational. The most significant price rises in June quarter were automotive fuel, plus 6.5%, and medical and hospital services at a plus 2.4%, due to the annual increase in private health insurance premiums. Have a listen to that one. Due to the annual increase in private health insurance premiums. All right, so we've already heard this statistic being bandied around about the cost on the medical system. We're talking about the insurance premiums here, not the medical system, right? All right, there is a difference between the two. Electricity prices rose 3.3% because it's winter, Jason. That's where we make money, at least down in the southern states. You guys have always got your air conditioners running up there. They also rose due to continued unwinding. The Western Australian government's $600 electricity credit to try and help out the pedestrians on the street. So what I wanted to just start to preface here with some of this data is, because when we talk about inflation, we're given it as a basket of goods. And so CPI is a basket of goods. Right, so if we have a look at it, and I'll just flick across here, right? So whoops, I was meant to go somewhere else with that, but let's just jump across here. So it's a basket of goods. So you might have petrol, you might have these are common things that you'll use in your house, right? So you might have food, you might have electricity, and what they do is they grab all of these things that are representative of what you would use, rent, property prices, of what your Australian consumer is consuming. And they go, are these things going up? Are they going down? Like, what direction are they going? And on average, are they trending in an upwards direction, or are they trending in a downwards direction? And what they do is, based on this basket of goods, which is meant to represent what consumers actually consume over the course of a year, they put them all together and they say, well, okay, so is the world becoming more or less expensive? Is the world becoming more or less expensive over the last quarter? Or is Australia becoming more or less expensive over the last quarter?
So the short-term answer is yes, it has been, right? Yeah.
Yes, it has been. But there's deeper questions that we need to be asking when it comes to this. And this is where you've got to start to dissect it, right? Because has our average basket of goods, on average, all of them gone up?
Well, it depends on the list, Andy. It depends on the list. And what's making them go up, right? We talked about this last week. Folks, when you're listening in right now, it's like, is this the regular increase of this demand from a regular marketplace? Or is it an irregular marketplace where, Andy was saying, supply chains and supply systems are severely hampered, if not like just out of action? I saw a stat right now that secondhand car sales have increased 13%. The value of secondhand cars is 13% in the last 12 months. And
mate, I'd argue that it's more like 25%, because apparently they used to lose 20% when you drove them out the lot. But you and I both bought cars, and we could have sold them the next day from brand new. We could have sold them secondhand for more than what we bought them for.
Mate, number one rule you and I have heard for 20 years is don't buy a brand new car, and if you do, you're going to lose value that day, right? And now it's like, well, buy a secondhand car. Keep it for a year, it's gone up in value. Any car. So it's crazy times, right? So that's not normal, or is it the normal for the future? What's the question? What's the answer?
And that That is just the perfect point to illustrate what everyone should be listening to and the questions that they should be asking themselves, rather than believing the headline rhetoric that comes out. Now, this is ABS data. This is sort of a factual basket of goods, but you're going to read this in the headlines. Inflation causes X, and I'm going to show you the effects of people getting scared about inflation. But we really need to understand. Drove down Main Street, Mornington, yesterday afternoon. Had a haircut, Jason, just for today.
Looking sharp, Andy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Feel sharp today. The first time I've seen this, I think, ever. Maybe when I was a kid, don't know. But I saw, it's hilarious, mate. I saw out the front of Mazda a big placard, cash for cars.
Cash for cars, baby. Yeah.
Cash for cars. Outside of a reputable dealership, cash for cars. Cash for cars. Yeah, the druggies were lining up in Bob. No, just joking. But cash for cars. It's an unprecedented supply chain interruption that has happened, that has caused, and here's the thing, short-term,
temporary.
Short-term.
Yep.
Maybe medium term, depends on your definition of time, right? But short-term to medium-term disruption into normal business operations.
Yep.
And as investors and as business owners, we need to be able to see through this and understand what is the longer term ramifications of this. And what I'm going to also take you through is where the opportunities come from this.
That's
right?
what we
Because
like.
this is the other great thing. As business owners and investors, if we can see through this, we can stop ourselves from making stupid mistakes. When it drops, you sell, gone. But also to be able to take the initiative of, if you're sitting on the edge and it drops, because what I'm about to show you, they go, I'm in, because I'm not listening to this white noise of horse manure that is coming through, where everyone's trying to scare and fearmonger you based on statistics that don't properly represent. So the key to take away from this is what is short-term interruptions. And we spoke about this last week, Jace. It was costs of materials going through the roof. Stuff can't get to our country. So the stuff that can't get to our country is going to go up in value because there's less of it around and there's more people who want it. That's as simple as it is. Demand pushes the cost of things up.
Yep. And here's the marketers getting in on it. Look at that. I love it. Well, I love it, but I don't love it. Get in now, because your presents there won't be presents in December.
Well, here's the thing. It's a great marketing tactic as well. People on the other side, Jace looking at doing some reno stuff around here for the office and a few other things, and chatting with one of my clients who's a very, very reputable supplier of building resources. If you're out there, you know who you are. Simon Sharon, not to mention any names, legends. And they were talking about 2 more price increases factored in for the next 2 quarters on all of the materials. And they're doing great and getting their hands on what they need in order to supply it out there, but it's going up. And the reason why it's going up is not because a tree is more expensive to grow, Jason. That's the long-term relationship. If timber goes up, it's because a tree is getting more expensive to grow over time, or it's in short supply. And at the moment, it's in short supply because we can't get it to the country, and there's some other things behind there as well, as far as fires and things globally that also play into it. But can we chat about oil for a tick?
Let's do it, Mandy. What's going on with oil?
All right. So this is just the perfect storm, Jason. People like me love this stuff, right? We really do, because long and short, and I'm going to paraphrase and use inaccuracies because it's coming from the Fenton perspective. But people go, okay, so timber's getting more expensive, houses are getting more expensive. Houses are getting more expensive for 2 different reasons, right? And possibly multiple other reasons, right, behind that, the construction of new ones. But then they go, inflation's running hot. Everything's getting more expensive. Should the Fed Reserve lift interest rates? The answer is no, by the way, in my opinion. And also probably the Fed in the US and also the RBA. But the reason why they're not doing it,
we need, Andy. Yep, keep going.
Is we've got to look at other things. So oil prices. So we've got to look. Why is oil becoming so expensive? It's not supply chain. Well, it is, but it's not. It's an argument that happened between the sheiks and the Americans around about 18 months ago, and I think that we even reported on it at the point in time because US, which is mostly shale oil, no, fracture. Gosh, I've just forgotten the term. But they use a different technology in the US to get most of the oil out of the ground, fracture technology, which is more expensive to produce it. And anyway, they had a little bit of a knock them down, drag them out with the sheiks over in Dubai and the Emirates, and they tried to go toe to toe. This was Trump going toe to toe, and ultimately they just said nah, and they turned on the taps and they flooded the market with fuel, and the pandemic hit and everyone stopped driving. So the stockpiles grew, everyone turned off the taps, everyone stopped driving. Petrol was just dirt cheap, but there is a time between when you switch the tap back on and when it hits the market. And we're in one of those unique quarters, Jason, where there's a few things that are firing together here and globally. It's no different globally. There are a few things that are firing together that are distorting our inflation. And look, again, this is just my research and my data, but it's distorting the CPI over a short period of time. So you're going to hear inflation spikes, not for any other reason other than there was an argument about 18 months ago. There was a bit of what we'd call a trade war, and now there's a shortage, but there's not a shortage of oil. But there's also a supply chain interruption, which means that it's compounding that time between when they turn the pumps back on and when it comes to our pocket.
Yeah.
So the overarching theme here is that right now we have multiple different industries. I've named two at the moment that have synthetic CPI increases that are happening, but over the other side, because it's so dramatic on one side, on the other side, it's actually falling. And the result of these supply chains equalizing, getting switched back on, means that one will suffer and the other one will take back over. And as investors, what we need to be vigilant, and as business owners as well, what we need to be looking for is the effect that this will have, because it most probably will impact on markets, because it always does. And Jace, we spoke about this once upon a time. I think it was 2008 when the world said, Jesus, Greece isn't going to pay down its debt. It's not going to pay back its debt bill. And so the market capitulated. It was 2000. Where are we? 2018. 2018.
I was going to say that was the GFC, Andy. The wrong
one.
Global financial crisis.
The most recent major correction that we had in the Australian markets was based on this huge publicity thing that the Greece hadn't paid back its debt. But let me tell you one thing, Jace. They haven't paid back their debt for the last 25 years beforehand. But all of a sudden, it was there was also some stuff happening in China. They linked together and they created a massive distortion in markets. And what happened is, boom, markets distorted, came down aggressively in that March period. And I'm pretty sure it was 2018. Getting too old, Jace. There's too many numbers in between my experience these days. 2018 corrected rapidly. So the key that we need to be looking for, and I'll just give you a little bit of a long-term look. I know I'm getting a little bit long-winded here, Jace, but
cut to the chase, Andy. Cut to the chase.
This is the inflation rate since 1986 here in Australia, and so you can see
zoom in on that, Andy. I want to have a look at that. There we go.
Who would have thunk it? Jesus, 9% inflation. 9% inflation. Unbelievable.
Ooh.
But let's have a look at realistically where we're sitting in the scheme of inflation here in Australia. All right, so we're sitting here, it's 2020, which are your sort of actual numbers here. This is the IMF, so this is International Monetary Fund, very reliable source of statistics. And as we sit here at 2020, yes, we bottomed out. 2021, we're back in and around that sort of 1%. Are we over long-term averages? No, I'd say that we're nowhere near it. Certainly a lot less volatile.
Yeah.
So getting to the point, Jace, so that I don't bore everybody with my statistics.
Andy loves a good stat. I love it, Andy.
With a little bit of an example of exactly what I was talking about, because here's the thing: when we see inflation start to rise, and the expectation of inflation rising, that 10-year bond curve goes up. And what is a 10-year bond curve? Great question, Jace. It is it is the cost of money over the long term, the
Yeah.
expected cost of money 10 years down the track. Right. So the 10-year bonds become more expensive if they believe inflation is going to kick in, because what that means is that interest rates need to go up to counter for the inflation. But just have a look at that. Right. In 2021, it absolutely took off like a rocket. I couldn't quite do the numbers, but about 80% increase, which is a big move. Like, look at the level of that over time. Was a big move, and look where it's coming, Jace. It's coming back almost to exactly where it was.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to the great inflation debate, where it's going to go is where it's going to go. But what we need to be aware of as investors is how that's going to impact it on us. And I want to keep drumming it home, because you hear so much of it in the news. Inflation concerns mean that property prices are going to fall. Inflation concerns mean that interest rates are going to go up. RBA came back out again. Not 2023 anymore. 2024 is their expectation for low interest rates. Right now, nobody holds the RBA accountable to their decisions, but
Alison's
ultimately we
loving it,
need
mate.
to be.
Alison's loving your stuff, mate. Keep it rolling, she said.
There's probably a few of my friends who would be saying that, well, Andy's not a doctor of anything, let alone economics, and they'd be right. But I've been wrong more than you. Just not you, Jace, but most of my economics friends out there. That's the master of being able to be wrong every year and still have a job.
Still have a job. Yeah. Yeah. What job do you have if you're always wrong and you're still in the news and you still get to keep your job? An
I'm
economist.
an economist.
I love
That's
it.
so key, so key. And Jace, I actually see this to be a real darling bud, because look, do I think the property prices are going to correct at some point in time and possibly overshoot? I reckon they will. Or here's the thing: I reckon if they do correct, they will overshoot, because it almost always does. And what could happen is you could be on a good rising trend. And the same is absolutely true of the stock market. It's just going to happen faster. Like, it'll happen really fast in the stock market. You will see it. Mark my words. We will still be talking, Jace. We'll go, oh my God, it's happening. Look at it. It's happening.
It's
Bond
underway,
yields will
Andy.
go up. The market will come down. And there will be people who go, this is the beginning of the end. And then there will be the people who try and look through it and start to understand, well, is the basket of goods, all of them, are they all going in the wrong direction, or is there a little bit of a change in the way that things are happening, and we need those supply chains to equalize? And if they do, where's the world going? And I think that it's a really important question that everyone should be considering moving forward, because I see this fundamentally changing fundamentally changing people's lives if they get it on the wrong side.
Yep, certainly. And mate, circle around just quickly. 100% every growth cycle that I've been involved in the 22 years of property investing, the property prices overshoot. They do. They don't stop on a dime. They have momentum. And right now, that momentum's being supported by, you called it synthetic reasons. Right now, there are synthetic reasons for the property pricing being in such hot demand, and multiple reasons in different places, depending on where you are. But the one that's the most effective right now is the lowness, the cheapness of interest. Like, money is like almost free. And while when you have a look at the what we called it a yield compression, your affordability, when the interest rate is 5% and you're earning $100,000, and now the interest rate is 3% and you're earning $100,000, nothing happened to your salary, but your ability to service more debt just went up $100,000. And in the reverse, what happens also when pricing adjusts, if the interest rates go up 8% or 2%, the next round of purchases cannot buy in at the new price that was set. They can't buy in at 600,000. They have to buy in at 500,000, even though they would like to have bought in at 600,000. And now that new price gets set. And my my conversation to everyone is the saving grace could be in this gig that would be we would call it a soft landing for property prices overshooting, could be that for the first time in, 8-10 years, salaries and wages could rise, and that's what we're all wanting to see. I know the government's underlying sort of push is to sort of let's get wages up, because that can be the trigger for all sorts of other things. But certainly, Andy, it overshoots. Property prices overshoot because they have too much momentum. They just keep going. And right now, it's kind of like there's no hill. It's a flat road because interest rates aren't very high and money's too cheap. At the end of the day, Harry asked this question, which I might sort of circle around to before I jump into what's in the news for me. But do we think the property boom will last longer than previous? I think so, Harry. A few reasons. Depending on where you are, money will stay cheap a long time until supposedly 2024 and maybe even beyond.
Mm,
What may happen along the way is wages may rise. They might try and keep up with inflation because, hey, listen, you're a used car salesman, and now your average commission's up 25% because used cars sales are up 25%. Like, think of that stuff, folks. Again, it might not be sustainable long term, like Andy said. It might be synthetic, but unfortunately, whether we like it or not, it flows through into what people will pay in the price of a real estate. So I think this boom will last a bit longer, Harry. There's certainly no supply comfort in sight. Okay, there's no big supply chain delivery happening in the major cities. So folks, like, we are in the worst undersupply of brand new residential real estate Australia has ever seen in history. Nobody's reporting on it right now, because we're in COVID times, and because, like, oh yeah, why would anyone be building right now? No one's coming here, right? But it actually started way before COVID. It actually started in 2018 when APRA's investigation into the finance world just poleaxed the world of property investors. Property investors bring on brand new properties. I've talked about this before. And Harry, in a few places, certainly I believe Brisbane, and Andy was joking about the Olympics, but you know, Brisbane hasn't had a run for almost 8 years. It's getting its run right now. It's also like a poster child for, move to Brisbane or move to Southeast Queensland and COVID won't be a problem, like internally in Australia. It's also the cheapest or the lowest cost average house price on the east coast of Australia. It is 50% cheaper than Sydney, 40% cheaper than Canberra and Melbourne, average house price for the same income, folks. And then now you've got the Olympics, right? So, and then, cheap, low interest rates for another 2 or 3 years, potentially. So, Harry, I think it will. I think it will be in areas where affordability is still, well under the $1 million mark. I think the run will last longer in places like Brisbane than it will in Melbourne or Sydney. But that's my tip on it, mate. So yeah. I think, well, right now, which shoots to my what's in the news, Andy, as we
Look,
have a bit of a look.
just before you jump off there, Jace, because I think you've almost misrepresented me, or maybe I said it wrong. Is that when I said synthetic manipulation, I meant synthetic manipulation, or sorry, synthetic adjustment based on supply chain.
Yes.
So and that was for new houses. Is that because like like I tell you many times, I don't know jack about property, but what I do know is a lot about the cost of materials and the cost of goods over time, and it's that supply chain interruption that is that synthetic increase in the construction cost
Yes.
of
Yeah.
houses and
Yep.
construction costs of renovations and things like that. So that's a synthetic kicker that will even out over a little bit of a period of time, and so will that part will stop to have a play sometime over the next 2 years at some point
Yeah.
in time, and it'll be interesting to see what plays out after that.
Well, and also you reminded me, just one little part of Harry's question was, given immigration is still to come, Harry, mate, you wait till immigration rolls into Australia when it comes to, property. We the government has to catch up. And you watch, we will have record immigration from people with money. The Australian government won't let, excuse the French, no hopers in. They'll let people in with money, and people will want to flow into Australia with cash, and moving from London, where the average apartment price is $2.1 million, and you can buy one for $700,000-$800,000, and it's twice as big. They're just going to come in with strong currency, strong cash. You watch that. That'll be another kicker also, as we kick into it, Andy. So you just reminded me of another little sort of thing that's sort of sitting in the winds for us all when it comes to that thing.
There's so much that's happening around us at the moment,
Yeah.
and there's so much that's not being reported on because
Yeah.
it's all a little bit grey, but it's the devil's in the detail, and that's where we need to be looking. Absolutely,
Right.
100%.
Yeah. And Harry's right, especially the world seeing Australia quite, in the scheme of things, quite a safe place when it comes to the pandemic. Australia and New Zealand real estate. A lot of people say, well, maybe I'll grab myself a bit of safe real estate to run to if I need to. So I think that's all going to have an effect. And the supply chain, I've chatted with you guys about this before. If we wanted to get the supply chain up and running, Andy, it's going to take 3 to 5 years. Even if we said, right, everyone at the start line, right, we're at the lowest supply, the apartment supply Brisbane has seen for 9 years right now. It's insane. It's insane.
And are they even focusing on it now? Like, are they?
No.
The question would be: are they distracted by the pandemic, and this is the lack and the
100%.
paralysis is actually happening right now? Because they don't seem to be doing anything behind the scenes. The pollies at the moment. I'm not going to get on a soapbox, but they're doing fuck all. Let's face it. Allegedly,
there's nothing that they're doing that's proactive other than making it worse, right? So what they've done is they go, hey, everyone have some free money. All that's done is brought out, a 10-year, in 1 year, a 10-year supply of purchasers who never wanted to take action, but now the government gave away free money and they're like, yeah, fuck it, we're in. I've got 20 grand of my super out over COVID. Plus the government's going to give me $25,000. I won't pay any stamp duty and also probably get another first home buyer bonus. Like literally the millennials got free houses. Like all the smart
apparently
ones.
They were stressed, Jace. Apparently they were stressed out.
I'm telling you, it was crazy times. Anyway, but yeah, I think there's a bit more to run. Certainly it will be area specific. Melbourne and Sydney will have different experiences to Brisbane and so on. But, overall, there's still more momentum in the property market. And especially if interest rates stay low. That is the big kicker for the moment as we roll into it. So
and just to top that up, inflation is the thing that they're going to throw around to scare you about interest rates. Because ultimately inflation is going to be one of the key drivers that everyone's looking at and that they're going to say moves the interest rates. But the Reserve Bank and the Federal Reserves are becoming smarter and certainly having a longer term perspective on what is real inflation, because they're actually scared about lifting interest rates as well, because if they lift them too sharply, then they will have dramatic short-term effects on the economy, and that will be a negative synthetic distortion. They're more aware of that now than they ever have been. So it looks like it's just me, Jace. I think I might be chatting by myself. So if you're out there in the land of wealth, wine, and wisdom, just give us a little bit of a kick. Let us know whether you can still hear Jason. Are you back?
Yeah, I'm back. Something went wrong. So can you hear me, Andy? Am I back?
You're back, mate. You're back. I can hear you. A little bit bitty, but I think the quality is increasing.
Wow. Yeah, the network connection did something. I'm on the Ethernet, which is a bizarre one. So
he's back.
There we go.
Harry says.
Fingers crossed. It all happens. Maybe one of my children are down there downloading something in the house. There you go. All right. Well, listen. Let me sort of show you a few of the things that have been in the news for me. NAB. Dwelling price forecast. It looking like good times ahead in 2021, and I think that'll flow into 2022. It's nothing we didn't already know, folks, this one for sure.
Take us through the headline numbers there, Jace, because they're a little bit distorted. So read through it. Looks like Sydney expectations 3.1%. What are we looking at here?
We're sort of halfway through 2021. Sydney's already had a good run, 20+%. Where delivering. Melbourne growth, also Brisbane. So Adelaide, Hobart in the 20s. Like most of the Australian capital cities didn't have Canberra in there, funnily enough, but Canberra's absolutely crushed it. If we have a look at this, I can show you right now. House prices in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, Canberra, and Hobart hit record highs. Record. Check this one out. As we have a look at a little bit of a live play on what's going on, Melbourne and Canberra have reached the average $1 million house price in the last little bit. $1 million. There you go, folks. 1.4 million. Yeah.
Look at
Canberra is now equals. And you have a look at Brisbane. Have a look at Brisbane. Yeah, look, it's catching up in the race. Number 4. Adelaide and Perth, they keep swapping around. But you have a look at this. Where does it finish the race? You check it out when it comes to this little bit here. 1.4 million. Divide that by 2. That's 700,000. Brisbane is actually 45% the average house price of Sydney right now, folks. And you have at Canberra and Melbourne. But a couple of the dark horses there, Andy. I think a dark horse is Perth. And what do I think that? Well, interestingly enough, when you have a look at a few things that are going out in the marketplace, actually, I've got a little something that I wouldn't mind sharing with everyone. Let me see. I don't know why that's not doing its behaving now. It's all being a bit strange here, Andy. My tech's gone a bit ghost in the machine, but check
it
this
might
out.
be. It might be we're telling the truth, so we might have to put on a tinfoil hat tonight.
They might be targeting us, Andy. Well, check this out. Labor's ended the 6-year policy of chasing negative gearing. Well, no shit, Dick Tracy. I don't know if anyone saw the latest headline that in New South Wales alone, Andy, in the last 12 months, $9.6 billion collected in stamp duty.
Whoa.
New South Wales alone, right? Because we're in a property boom. Why would anyone want to mess with that revenue in the next little bit? Huh?
It is. It's short-sighted bullshit, and it's they look for the. But it's what are they? They moray fish that just suck onto the sharks and clean the fodder.
That's it.
It's a bet. I'll give you a tip as what they could do if they wanted to make more revenue, make more money, and cost Australians less. Right, make more money and cost Australians less. But get rid of capital gains tax.
Get rid of the bloody thing. I'm a fan of T. If you use it, you pay the tax. If you don't, then fine.
Spark up the GST and spark up you can even maintain the stamp duty that you promised to get rid of about 20 years ago that you didn't get rid of.
When you brought in GST, they promised to get rid of stamp duty because they brought GST in.
But if all you did is enabled people to transact property faster in there. So stop putting all of these barriers in place. Imagine if you could transact in and out of the property market quickly. Yes, you got your stamp duties, but if you get rid of these capital gains tax or give larger capital gains tax discounts, you end up with people not sitting on their property because of the fear of the capital gains that sits behind them. You could actually
about this, right? And it's just another way, like property becomes again one of those places often where very wealthy people park wealth because the loosening of that wealth isn't worth it. It makes it like, oh well, I'm not going to sell my home or that house, or look at the tax I would pay. And it's a stupid disincentive system as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, when it comes to our economy long term. So, thankfully, for the moment, anyway, gang, the negative gearing rubbish and capital gains tax, no one's looking to attack it at this point in time. So, we shall see, Andy. We shall see. But we shall see. But, supposedly, you talked about this before, and probably inflation it is, housing bubble goes global. It's affecting the global positioning and situation. In America right now, there's a construction boom as well. Many countries around the world are stimulating their economies by, doing some sort of incentives when it comes to construction or housing or property. And, that's all happening when it comes to your inflation figures in relation to that. But I thought this one was interesting. The largest full-year dividend paid by Rio Tinto in over 148 years. I think,
Oh,
I don't know
yes.
if that's in history. Have a look at that, folks. In the middle of a pandemic, how does the worst pandemic the world's ever seen, how does that work? How does that happen? And so behind the scenes, Andy, like you said, there are things going on. We get sort of, caught up with, I don't know, maybe some interesting of, someone's tale about something, but, these stories, which are amazing stories, are happening right under our nose.
Well, and even if we just strip it back to the basics, and look, we should probably have a little bit of a session on that, because the banks are all doing buybacks. It's in the news at the moment, and people are
Yeah.
probably sitting there going, "What the is a buyback?" But here's the thing: when investors are going to profit significantly from the bank buybacks that are happening right now. Too late to get in; it's already in motion. You might be able to get in a little bit, but I'm not telling you to do that. But it's a function, and let's strip it right back to the basics, Jace. If you and I were back at primary school, and the days when you were back at school and you used to barter around, somebody had nunchucks, somebody had some bubble gum or something like that, and you used to have the old black market trade at school.
Yeah.
And generally, lunch money was what, $1 or $2 or something back then that you used to get. So that pretty much dictated the cost of the goods, didn't it?
It did.
So, and this report's really old now. It's a report by McKinsey, Australian. Actually, no, McKinsey International, I think it is. So the $10 trillion rescue package of governments. Now, this is dated, so there's more money that's gone out there. $10 trillion. $10 trillion with a T, Jace. $10 trillion. So is that not going to lift a new base level of goods into the future? And I think that the other thing we don't ask ourselves the question is, what's the new norm? What's the new level? Right? Because if you all of a sudden gave us $50 for our lunch money, Jace, at school, how much do you reckon that bubblegum would cost that you couldn't get at the school tuck shop? You'd sell it for a small fortune, wouldn't you?
You would.
And that would be the new normal. And so we need to start to think about this stuff. And you're going to see it in financial markets like Rio, like the banks doing their buybacks now. They're going to start buying back the shares and distributing significant amount of capital gains to their investors out there. So, mate, Rio, good pickup.
Good pickup, absolutely. And, playing right into where you're at, the banks are not only doing buybacks, but they're shutting down branches and minimizing their costs. Now, call me a cynic. This is probably a perfect time for something that they've wanted to do for a long time, under the guise of, COVID and all sorts of stuff. And again, folks, it'll go to their bottom line. It'll go to their share price. Ultimately, these maneuvers, they didn't come down the last hour. These people who run these businesses, and at the end of the day, you want them to be profitable. That's an important part of any business. But yeah, the smart people making the right maneuvers at the right time. The media makes noise about, let's be honest, shit we don't need to pay attention to. It's the thing they're not making the noise about.
Yes.
Is the things that we want to keep an eye on.
Yes.
Right. Learn from.
Yes.
Yep. And a shout out to all our brothers and sisters in New South Wales. Yep. There are plenty of support in the banking system. I do have to give, I beat the banks up a lot, but I do have to give them, I tip my hat to them for how they have treated, by and large, people throughout the pandemic. So if you're there in New South Wales, you're struggling, gang, call your lender, call your bank. They will support you. And if they don't, you call me and Andy, and I'll give you a hand to bloody give them a hide and to make sure that they do.
Yeah.
Because the lenders are giving people a hand at this time. So, bit of a shout out to you guys just to make sure you don't feel like you're alone out there. Take care in that sort of stressful time when it comes to those sorts of things as we roll along.
And understand that it's actually your right to be able to do it as well. And as much as Jace has given the banks a pat on the back, it's part of the politicians who have sat there and negotiated with the banks and basically said, well, we will assist your funding in giving the gap there. So a rare time where Jason and I will pat the banks and the politicians on the back. But honestly, it's there for you. And so for you, for your friends, for those people that you know in business, you would be shocked if you're listening to this and you know business owners out there or know people who have lost jobs because of what's going on in Sydney at the moment. You would be shocked about how little they know about what we're talking about right now. So let them know.
Yep.
Have the conversation, as Jason and I always talk about. We love to talk about sex, politics, religion, money. It's all of the important things. I think the reason why people don't like to talk about them is maybe they fall short in some of them, or they don't want us to be talking about it because they're on the wrong end of the stick. Pardon the pun, but ultimately, I think these are the things that we should be talking about because ultimately they pretty much govern the way that we operate in life.
We need to demystify, desensitize. They're really important conversations. And right now, folks, if you're listening in New South Wales or otherwise, and you're having some challenges in your financial space and world, certainly business owners, there are mechanisms, guys. There are mechanisms, gang. And maybe, Andy, it would be great to get, some of our advisors that we know back in the next couple of weeks, specifically for the New South Wales crew potentially, when it comes to the world of safe harboring, restructuring, protecting yourself. Ladies and gents, the world of entrepreneurialism and starting businesses and being a property investor, there's risks that you take and there are things that can happen, e.g. COVID, that are out of your control. And the laws and the processes are actually there to protect you. There's actually some good ones, but many people don't know. Often many advisors of business owners don't know either. And certainly Andy and I, unfortunately, the School of Hard Knocks have taught us, me and Andy, a few tough lessons, a few uppercuts and so on. But certainly anyone in New South Wales you're struggling, reach out to myself or Andy. But we might bring a couple of advisors on in the next couple of weeks, Andy. It might be really appropriate to talk about that stuff.
I think so. I think it's, for me, it's unusual going through this this time because last time it was pretty heavy Victoria and look, we're out this weekend and to a degree, we've still got pretty harsh conditions. We can go out to a pub, Jace, but we can't go to a friend's place, which is, don't even get me started. But I feel for everyone in Sydney because we've been there, we've gone through it, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's any good times soon. And realistically, this was the reason why we started this, Jace and I. This was, and a lot of it was Jace supporting me through when I was facing it as a business owner down here, lockdown. What does it all mean? Trying to support my clients and not having my team instant accessibility around me, and now our compadres in New South Wales. And we're not like Queenslanders down here in Victoria. We like people in New South Wales. We don't have the equivalent of the Maroons down in Victoria. We have the Storm, and they win shit too. But ultimately, we're here. So the key thing is here, and I'd love for you guys to just start whacking it into the chat now. If you've got a business owner friend, if you've got people who are struggling, put it in the chat, which is the comments field of whatever social platform that you're on. Brandon, if you're out there, please keep that filthy stuff to yourself. We don't want any more of that stuff coming through our feed. We've got an interesting personality that likes to give some interesting commentary. I hope that nobody's seen it. But just whack it in the chat box now, the things that are coming up with the business owner friends of yours, or as you as a business owner in New South Wales. investor, whatever the case may be, start peppering us so that we can get our team, our A team of contacts, in order to be able to come back to you guys and support you, support your friends. I think, Jace, based on that, we'll get a good friend of ours, Dermot McVeigh, back on. I'm sure that if time will allow, he'll come back on. Dermot was pivotal, and certainly on my side of the equation, helped two business owners basically still be allowed to have businesses now. Otherwise, they would have gone to the wall. There's a whole raft of things that they didn't know existed that he lifted the veil on. And I'm not even sure that he actually professionally helped them. He uncovered the curtain and allowed them to know what it was that they could do, and then they implemented on the back of it. So I mirror what you say, Jace. There is a raft of stuff that you don't know, not you, Jace, and there's the stuff that you don't know and the stuff that I don't know. But for most business owners out there, there is the whole world, and what they know is 2% of what's possible. And getting access to how do we get out of this, rather than just the dark wall of we can't pay the bills. There's so many more options that sit behind there, and you don't know it until you know it. And quite often you don't know it until it's too late. So let's see if we can bring that hindsight forward. So if you know business owners, get them to come along. This isn't a promotional pitch. We just love chatting regardless. And we love you guys listening in. But feed us what you need to know by questions into the chat or into our messengers, and we'll bring the right people on. You'll literally grab the $1 billion Refidex of Jason and I, and we'll bring that in, and we'll try and help you guys through this as best as we possibly can, especially all the team there in New South Wales.
Absolutely, mate. Well said. Well said. Well, folks, I think that'd be a nice segue to put a pin in it. And so a couple of good shout outs there. Thanks, Harry. Always great to have you here, mate. And thanks for your support in our community as well. We know you're part of our network, and always appreciate what you do as well, buddy. So thanks for the shout out, Alison. Always good. Always good to see you here. I think you're the most regular, which is awesome and fantastic. So always awesome to see you as well.
I think we need a spot at the bar for Alison, don't we? We need a glass in the background.
That's it. That's Alison's chair. Yeah, exactly. And great to see you guys. Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Majib. Fantastic. And Michelle and all the others as well. Great to have you guys on today. And well, that's about it, Andy. I think we'll call it a day. Wealth, Wine, and Wisdom. Long time regular as well. That's awesome, mate. Awesome to have you here and supporting the channel. And we love the idea that we can add some value. So awesome job. All right, team. Well, that's it. I think we're done and we're dusted, Andy. So I think it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night.